I've always loved hearing stories from old professors, the ones who have been around long enough to collect decades of odd experiences, whispers of strange happenings, rumors passed between students, and the kind of unexplained occurrences that don't make it into the official university history. This one comes from a listener, a former TA at Stout, who picked up a particularly strange story from a retired photography professor. It was shared over drinks at a bar that used to be in an old historic house. Of course I knew the place. The bar eventually moved into a newer building after the house was torn down, but the new place just isn't the same. Something about the creaky floors and dim lighting made the old place feel special, like the kind of spot where, after a couple of drinks, you'd start trading ghost stories and urban legends, unsure where the truth ended and embellishment began. Back in the day, photography students at Stout were still learning on black and white film. It was part of an introductory course, basic stuff. Students would take their cameras out around town, shoot a roll of film, and then develop the negatives in the campus darkroom. After that, they'd use enlargers to make their final prints. Over the years, the professor had seen all the usual spots in Menomin turn up in student portfolios: scenic shots of the lake, the train bridge, the historic downtown buildings, and of course, Cemetery Island. There was nothing particularly unusual about students taking photos there. It was quiet, atmospheric, and had just enough local lore to make it interesting. But on one occasion, something was different. The professor was reviewing negatives when he noticed something odd. At first, he assumed it was a developing error. Film can sometimes touch in the developing spool, causing strange patterns or distortions. But this was different. Something in the negative caught his attention. Curious, he pulled out a magnifying loupe to get a closer look. And that's when the uneasy feeling crept in. The distortion wasn't a streak, a chemical issue, or anything mechanical. It looked like a figure. Not a blur. Not a trick of the light. A half-formed, shadowy presence that shouldn't have been there. The professor decided to have the student make a print. He was curious. Maybe it would be clearer. Maybe they'd find an explanation. The student set up the negative in the enlarger and began focusing the image onto the paper. The room was quiet, just the usual hum of the darkroom fans. Then, snap, the entire lab went black. Now, if you've never been in a darkroom, you might not realize how unnerving this is. These labs are built to be completely lightproof. No windows, no emergency light seeping in from the hallway. Just sudden, suffocating darkness. For a few long seconds, no one spoke. Then someone got the breaker flipped back on. The dim red glow of the safe lights flickered to life, casting eerie shadows across the lab. That's when they noticed the enlarger. The lens had cracked. Not shattered, just split. A single fracture running through the glass as if something had pressed against it. Something unseen. That was enough for the day. Class was dismissed. The professor expected to see the student at the next class session. After all, it wasn't that strange of an incident. Dark rooms have electrical quirks. Glass can be faulty. It was weird, but not impossible. But the student never showed up. Days passed. Then weeks. The professor, confused, asked a faculty friend in administration if the student had dropped the class. The response was stranger than expected. The student hadn't just dropped the course. They had disappeared. Gone. No forwarding address, no transfer request. They were just missing. And no one seemed to have any answers. After hearing this story, I was intrigued. A vanishing student, a broken enlarger, a shadowy figure on a film negative. What was I supposed to make of it? There was only one thing to do. I grabbed my old film camera, loaded a fresh roll, and headed out to Cemetery Island. I don't shoot on film often, but I always enjoy the process. It forces you to slow down, to think about each shot. No instant previews, no endless retakes, just a click, the winding of film, and the anticipation of seeing what you captured later. I took my time, enjoying the quiet. No strange shadows, no eerie figures lurking at the edge of my vision. Just the wind, the water, and the rhythmic click of my shutter. Later, in my makeshift darkroom, I developed the negatives. One by one, I held them up to the light. Just the usual stuff. Maybe it was just a tall tale after all. But I think I'll try again sometime. Because even if there's nothing out there, a day spent shooting film is never wasted.